So I typically want to do like a little bit of just recap and housekeeping stuff as well. As usual, although I still just want to remind people of, I mean, they're not like hardcore rules, but as I would love to just, as I pour into, just preparing a way that I feel cared for back and that I know that you guys are all there listening, is just to participate. It really helps for me to engage. I don't love this, like when I'm like talking to the screen and I can't see the chat. It's like really, it's hard for me to understand like whether or not people are connecting at all. So, and then of course, take action. That's really your benefit the most, is if you're taking action and applying what we're learning as it relates to mindset. Support one another and zero trash talking. There are going to be a lot of moments where people are going to be sharing vulnerably what they're going through and some challenges. And so please understand that we are all on the journey of entrepreneurship. And so of anyone, we should know and understand the best of how hard the journey is. And so please support one another. And no trash talk. And I'm not going to go through it in depth, but just as a reminder of why I talk about mental health, is that it's really tied into mindset. Your mental health and how you think and perceive and act is directly related to your mindset. So the way that we have developed and conditioned ourselves, or we became conditioned through our environments, is really how that has affected our mindset and our mental health. And so that's why I continue this conversation. As it relates to entrepreneurship, I'm going to have this as a standard or just a templated slide, is that entrepreneurship and mental health are really, really, really important. Yeah, but like I had said, and hopefully y'all read the article, and if not, please go back and search for it in the Sub2 Facebook group, that where it talks about, Forbes magazine talks about how 72% of entrepreneurs are directly affected by mental health. Excuse me. I'm sure that all of you guys have experienced challenges and other emotional experiences and yeah, everything, just the ups and downs of it, right? And I don't even talk about I think that entrepreneurship is the bigger umbrella, and then real estate investing is under that, right? And especially if we want to reach great lengths, I would imagine that most of us eventually want to reach to the degree where we're utilizing real estate and investing to free ourselves of having a job, and then we can then pursue other things and we can do what we enjoy doing, and also just serving in a capacity where we don't have to be distracted by our W-2, for example, right? So just really important. Hi, LT. So yeah, I just coming from last week, again, my request for participation, I would love to hear if anyone either did last week, or even if you can just imagine. So now one of the homeworks was to think of a mindset issue that you feel stuck in, and if you guys were able to practice visualization. And I'm definitely happy to share as well what I had done. But yeah, I think just kind of, did anyone sort of practice the offensive, if we're going to think about this journey as a game, right? As a sport, did you guys practice the offensive sort of practice of visualizing and not being stuck? And what did you guys go through? And then also defensive, so that when you were kind of feeling stuck, or if you were feeling triggered in any way, did you guys practice any sort of defensive practice of naming the growth opportunity, as opposed to what I think we most typically tend to do, which is just autopilot, and you kind of revert towards how you were conditioned to cope with things, which is like, oh, just self-defeating thoughts and whatnot. I would love to hear if anyone practiced it, or as I'm sharing now. Randy, you've been with me in these mindsets. I know that we had, like, it's been challenging to connect and stuff. And forgive me for not like maybe reaching out more, but I know that you've been doing your thing and you've been with me since the very beginning. And I know that you've actively worked on it. And so I'm proud of you for doing it. It's hard, right? And I know that you've posted some times where you've, felt really defeated and wanted to give up and stuff like that. And the community has reached out to you, but I think you're doing the hard work. And I love that you had mentioned that it's like you were kind of running into your default, like, oh man, the self-defeating thoughts and and even just like words that you would tell yourself and that you noticed it, right? And we're going to be talking about that today, but that's incredibly, incredibly powerful. And I hope that you can celebrate that. And like, yeah, I think that's another practice as well of just like celebrating. And that's an offensive practice and offensive. When I say offensive, I mean like, in sports, right? Like that you're doing the work to prevent and to prepare, right? And you're building that for yourself. So amazing job in doing that. How did it feel just going through that when you were like, oh, whoa. Yeah, you've got like you said, you're a visionary. You've got your own visions that you want to accomplish, right? And that's for all of us, is that we have all of our goals. If we don't figure this out, again, it's like mindset is always going to be there. And you talk to people from, different levels of their financial wealth, if you will, and everyone has it, right? And so I love that you had said that you recognize it didn't serve you. And that's incredibly important, because we're so like, oh, let's just go. And then we don't recognize that that's something that we need to pay attention to. So continue to do that. Because I think the beauty of and the power really of what you're experiencing right now is that you're gonna realize more quickly every time that your self-defeating thoughts and those kind of autopilot things come up that have not served you. You're gonna realize it a lot faster, and then you're gonna recover, right? So I think the goal in life, yes, we always want like peace, and we want like not for things to go wrong, right? Of course, that's our default desire. But the reality is that the thing that's more important is to build resiliency and healthy coping around it, right? So you're doing that right now. So continue doing that. I'm definitely cheering you on, and thank you for sharing. Again, purpose of this book and the reason why the author wrote it was really to help us understand and to receive tools. That's the most important part, is that we're not just reading to like, oh, we're learning things. And I love practical methods, right? I mean, I went into grad school because I knew that the things that I would study, I had to put into practice in my internships and practicums, right? So let's look at that as if we are in grad school. We are in a practice. You guys are practicing becoming the successful entrepreneurs that you want to become. And so if we could even, I keep on thinking about sub 2 as a university. And if we think about it that way, that we're not just learning and absorbing information, but we're practicing, then that'll really be where you're going to transform your life, because you're practicing and you're applying what you're learning, and you're taking the tools that I'm providing you, Pace is providing you, the community is providing you, and you're living it out, right? So again, I actually want to start with this mantra, and then I want to end with it. So I actually did 2 slides. But again, to get what you've never had, you have to do what you've never done. And that's incredibly, incredibly important. If you guys have a vision board, write that down if that encourages you, or find something that speaks and can help you to remember that when you need to do things that you're not accustomed to at this time in order for you to grow. So we're going to just dive right in. So chapter 2 is all about becoming aware. And forgive me, because there's so much meat to this particular chapter that I did kind of copy and paste a lot, and I will be reading, but I want to be able to also talk about it. So again, if you guys have any questions or comments, any sort of personal experiences that you've had either in the past or present, or you're struggling with, please, please, please share. Don't make me call on you. I get lonely. Conscious and unconscious, right? Or subconscious, if you will, right? So this is really, really, really important, because we tend to operate actually more on the conscious side. And I'll show you kind of a picture of it. I'll read it to you. So it is only when you are conscious. So conscious is aware, right? Awake. That's like another, when we talk about in medical terms, and she references that consciousness, or, oh, is that person conscious, right? Like if you were to go into a hospital and the doctors were to assess you, oh, is that person conscious or not, right? Awake. So when you are awake or conscious, that you are able to see yourself, a process of self-awareness that can suddenly reveal so many of the previously hidden forces constantly at work, molding you, manipulating you. Oh, that's a strong word too. Manipulating you and holding you back. You can't eat better, drink better, or you can't eat better, stop drinking, love your partner, or improve yourself in any way until you become transparent. Transparent, what does that mean? Transparent, if you were to look at a piece of paper and it's transparent, you can see through it. You can see the real picture of yourself, the real, right? And that's really what's important, is the real side, not maybe what other people think of you or even the negative thoughts of yourself, but truly who you are, right? Because if you intuitively know what you need to do to change for the better, why don't we do it? I'll say why don't we do it? It's not a moral failure. It's because you're stuck repeating these more or less automatic behavioral patterns, right? And this is like, I'm not trying to make this process a really kind of like just in the clouds, like woo woo, like really complex thing, right? This practice in and of itself, and Randy just described it, right? When he said that he was on autopilot, right? When something bad happened and he kind of went into what he's familiar with, which is, and I believe that we are conditioned based on the environments that we grew up in, right? So if you grew up in I love my parents. I always have to preface it. I love my parents, but I grew up in a very, very blaming and shaming environment. My parents blamed and shamed each other, and they blamed and shamed my brother and I when we did something wrong. So guess what? That's how I, by default, responded to things. And so similarly, like even with what Randy was saying, that he got in autopilot. When something didn't happen the way that he wanted to, he went into autopilot, self-defeating thoughts. It doesn't serve you. And you need to recognize that as fast as possible. Even just realistically speaking, the real estate investing world is very, very male dominated. And so I'm speaking to you, brothers, and people who are not aware that it's important to recognize emotions and the conscious and subconscious and how you operate, right? And so it's really, really, really important to understand those autopilot reactions. And like Randy did, how do you slow it down? How do you slow down the process where you could actually recognize it and pivot from that? And the faster that you do that, the faster it'll serve the goals that you want to accomplish, so that you don't keep on hitting those roadblocks, because the mental and the mindset roadblocks is truly what is going to slow you down. What I had described earlier is that I wish that the picture was a little bit more like 10% is like this big. And I was trying to find like other pictures, and I stole this from the internet, but the conscious mind is only 10% of how we operate. So every day when we're doing things, everything is just autopilot. It's like, do you need to tell yourself, oh, I need to then brush my teeth, or, oh, I need to do this? Like you just are aware, or not that you're aware, you just do it, right? When you drive, you're not like, I need to then make sure that I turn left here and I push the gas pedal and I step on. You're not telling yourself that every time, right? You just do it because you've been doing it. The most important thing to understand of the conscious and subconscious mind, or the unconscious mind, is that the greater part of the way that we operate is actually based on our subconscious mind, right? So the conscious mind is critical thinking, logical thinking, willpower, right? But that only makes up 10% of the awareness of us operating in that, right? And then the rest of it is autopilot, the subconscious. Our beliefs, our development, our emotions, and our feelings, right? Even the things that we value, it's all subconscious. And so the reason why this work is so challenging but so important is that we need to actually learn how to understand where we're running on autopilot and where it doesn't serve us. And I love that Randy shared his example, because I'm going to reference that a lot, is that's incredibly important, because we all do it in our own ways, whether you recognize it or not. And I am not a big fan of white knuckling through life. It doesn't serve us, and it makes it really painful in a degree that I don't believe serves us for the greater good, because people white knuckle through life and then they develop physical ailments that I believe are a direct correlation of you ignoring maybe some signs in your body that shouldn't be there, right? When your emotions are incredibly important, again, they tie into your mindset. And if you're ignoring that, I heard a really great sermon by my college pastor a long time ago that we are given the ability to feel pain for a reason. So for example, if you were to cut fruit, and then you slice your finger, right? And then you look at your finger and you're like, oh, I'm bleeding, right? It's an indication, right? And then you feel pain. And that indication should tell you, oh, wait, I need to do something about that, right? But the irony is, why don't we do that in our emotional state? It's because we were never taught to identify and be given a safe space to even talk about, oh, ouch, that hurts. And maybe it's not the physical pain, but it's the emotional part, right? And so this is all tied into the fact that our subconsciousness is really what drives our actions, whether you want to believe it or not. 90%. I mean, I've heard like different, percentages, but 90%, the majority of how we operate is subconscious. It's automatic. And so if we can slow down the process and to recognize certain automatic behaviors that are on autopilot that don't serve us, this is an incredibly important process. Homeostatic impulse. That's what the next part of this chapter talks about. So the overwhelming pull of the subconscious mind, the autopilot mind, makes it hard for us to change. We are not wired for change. When we do try to push ourselves out of that autopilot, we face resistance from our mind and our body. And so this is a reminder that I wanted to put in, where we are all changing, and we all want to change, and we're on different parts of the journey of how much we are putting into action. But that's why I love when Caroline says 1% better every day. And it's important to also understand that when we continue on this journey of trying to do things that we've never done before in order to attain what we've never had before, that our bodies naturally tell us not to change. It's evolutionary, and I didn't go too much into that part of it, but where she talks about it in the book, but that's kind of the way that we're wired, right? But it doesn't mean that we can't change, and it doesn't mean that change is not good for us. It just means that our bodies naturally react, and they want to bring us back to a place of familiarity. But sometimes the familiarity isn't what's good for us, right? So when I was a family therapist, my team and I, we used to always joke that the families that we're working with are functionally dysfunctional. And we are all like that. And I'm not saying that in a negative way, right? We have all developed unhealthy coping skills and thought patterns from the environments that we grew up in that no longer serve us. And you have to recognize those things, because that is literally, when I talk to people every day, those are the things that hold us back. But in reality, you have been so accustomed to living in that way that is actually your homeostasis. That is your body's balance. It's imbalanced or it's unhealthy, but you're familiar with it. And you have spent however many years of your life living in that way that your body is accustomed to that level of unhealthiness, if you will. Like, I'll even give you an extreme example of so when I was working inpatient in the hospital, I'm a medical social worker, so I work outpatient now, but when I used to work inpatient, I worked in the ICU, and I would have patients come in and they were alcohol detox. And when I look at their chart, this one patient had been an alcoholic, had been addicted to, I don't like to use terms that kind of feel like identifiers or, labels, but a person that was addicted to alcohol for 20 years. And finally, his body reached a point to where it was no longer functioning, liver damage, all this stuff, right? Guess what hospitals do with patients that go through alcohol withdrawal? They actually prescribe, it's the craziest thing, but they actually prescribe doses of alcohol in order to help that person then not go from an extreme, drinking and then cold turkey, because that actually physiologically would kill that person.